Welcome to today's deep dive, and may God bless your day and your entire week. Today, we have a truly incredible mission lined up for you.
We really do.
We are going to be unpacking an absolute masterclass in ancient craftsmanship and sacred design. We are looking closely at Exodus chapter 37.
Right.
Specifically, we have a stack of sources here from two very distinct, highly respected study Bibles. That's the Holman Study Bible and the NAA.
And we're going to dig into their texts and their study notes to basically reconstruct the building of the tabernacle's inner furnishing.
Exactly.
But to really appreciate what we are about to explore, we have to set the scene by introducing you to the central figure behind this massive undertaking.
Right, the lead builder.
Yes, his name is Bezalel. And according to the text, he wasn't just, a skilled worker. He was the master craftsman who was specifically filled with the Spirit of God to supervise and execute these incredibly intricate designs.
He really was the visionary.
He was the overarching architect, the lead artisan, the guy making it all happen today.
Okay, let's unpack this because I want to promise you, the listener, that this isn't just going to be a reading of an ancient blueprint.
No, definitely not.
We are taking you on a journey right into the tabernacle. We're going to explore not just what was built, but the mind-boggling scale, the intense artistry, and the physical reality of these objects.
The sheer weight of them.
Exactly. And we are starting in the most sacred space, a room known as the Holy of Holies.
Which is such a powerful starting point.
Right. And the centerpiece of this enclosed room is the Ark of the Covenant.
The Ark is arguably one of the most famous artifacts in human history.
Oh, absolutely.
And Exodus 37 gives us the exact specifications Bezalel used to build it. It started with wood, specifically acacia wood.
Right.
Acacia is a dense, incredibly durable wood native to the desert regions, which makes it, perfect for a structure meant to last.
But it wasn't just a wooden box.
Far from it. Bezalel overlaid the entire thing with pure gold. And when the text says he overlaid it, it specifies that he covered it in pure gold, both on the inside and on the outside.
Which is crazy to think about. I mean, the implication of coating the inside is fascinating. That interior space would rarely, if ever, be seen by human eyes.
Right, it was completely closed off.
Yet it received the exact same treatment of pure gold as the exterior. It speaks to a standard of perfection that just isn't dependent on an audience.
That's a great point. It wasn't for show.
And then we get to the dimensions. I really appreciate how our two sources synthesize this information for us because reading ancient measurements can sometimes leave you wondering what it actually looked like in physical space.
Yeah, visualizing ancient blueprints requires us to translate not just the numbers, but the spatial reality.
Exactly.
The Holman source gives us the traditional measurements directly from the text. That's 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high.
Which is a bit abstract for us today.
It is. But the NAA study notes do something incredibly helpful for modern readers by translating those ancient dimensions directly into the metric system.
Oh, perfect.
They tell us the ark was 1.10 meters long and 0.66 meters for both the width and the height.
So for you listening, imagine an object roughly the size of a very substantial, deep coffee table or maybe a large storage chest.
Right.
Completely encased in gleaming gold.
And the design heavily emphasizes mobility. Bezalel cast 4 gold rings and attached them to the 4 corners of the ark. 2 rings on one side, 2 on the other.
And then he crafted carrying poles out of that same acacia wood?
Yes, and overlaid those poles with gold as well.
So they were inserted right into the rings.
Exactly. So the ark could be carried without anyone ever having to touch the body of the ark itself.
The theology of that mobility is practically baked right into the engineering.
It really is. They are building a highly sacred object, but it is not tethered to a single geographic location. It is designed to move with the community.
But the wooden chest itself is really only the base. Sitting right on top of it is the mercy seat.
Yes.
This piece matches the exact footprint of the ark, so that's 1.10 meters by 0.66 meters.
But unlike the ark, which was wood covered in gold,
The mercy seat was made entirely of pure, solid gold.
which is just astonishing.
What does it actually take to work with a solid slab of gold of that size? We are talking about a massive, heavy sheet of pure, precious metal acting as a lid.
What's fascinating here is this sculptural work that sat on top of this solid gold lid and how it was actually created.
The cherubim.
Right. The text describes 2 cherubim positioned at either end of the mercy seat. Now, Bezalel didn't sculpt these figures separately in a mold and then weld them or nail them onto the lid.
No.
The text is highly specific. These figures were hammered out of the exact same single piece of gold as the mercy seat itself.
Which is mind-blowing when you consider the risk involved in cold forging a solid slab of gold into two complex figures. How does that change our understanding of Bezalel's skill?
It elevates him to an absolute master.
You have a solid mass, and through sheer hammering, Bezalel and his team coaxed two complex, winged figures out of the very ends of that slab.
And the text notes, their wings were spread upward, forming a canopy that covered the seat.
Right.
And they were positioned facing each other, but with their faces looking downward.
The level of metallurgical skill required there is just monumental. Gold is malleable, sure, but taking one continuous mass and hammering it into a perfectly flat lid with two intricate sculptures rising out of the ends.
Without breaking the material.
Exactly. Without snapping off a wing during the shaping process, it requires absolute mastery.
It is an intense, demanding process that ensures the final piece has complete structural and symbolic unity.
It's all one piece.
And there is a crucial insight we pull from the NAA study notes here that puts us all into perspective regarding the layout of the tabernacle.
Because the spatial arrangement really changes how we view the objects.
The NAA study notes point out that these two pieces together, the Ark and the mercy seat resting on top of it, were the absolute only objects destined to be placed inside the Holy of Holies.
The only ones.
This space was completely separated from the rest of the tabernacle by a thick veil.
Wow.
You have this intensely consecrated, incredibly valuable masterpiece of gold and wood sitting in total isolation. It is a room defined entirely by the singular presence of this one object.
That level of isolated perfection in the Holy of Holies really sets a high bar.
It does.
But Bezalel's team carried that exact same obsession with detail out into the main space. Stepping through the veil into the room known as the Holy Place, the first thing we encounter is the table of showbread.
Right. And like the Ark, the table was constructed from acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold.
Our sources provide the dimensions again.
They do. When we look at the metric translation from the NAA, it's slightly smaller than the Ark. Spatially, it functions almost like a modern, highly ornate console table. 2 cubits long, 1 wide, 1.5 high, which translates to 0.88 meters by 0.44 meters and 0.66 meters high.
But it's the architectural detailing on this table that really showcases the woodworking and goldsmithing capabilities of the team.
Absolutely.
It wasn't just a flat surface for utility. Bezalel made a gold crown or a molding that went all the way around the edge.
And then he added a border to the table that was roughly the width of a handbreadth.
Meaning about 4 fingers wide.
Right, and that border had its very own golden molding running around it.
So you have these concentric layers of gold trim framing the table, creating boundaries within boundaries.
And like the Ark, it needed to be mobile. 4 gold rings were cast and placed at the 4 corners near the legs of the table.
And gold-covered acacia wood poles were made to pass through those rings.
Exactly. But the table wasn't meant to sit empty in the holy place.
No, it had a very specific purpose.
The text lists an array of pure gold utensils that Bezalel made specifically to rest on this table. They crafted plates, incense dishes, jars, and bowls that were used for pouring libations or drink offerings.
And every single piece of that table setting was made of pure gold.
Completely pure. The study notes clarify that later on, the bread of the presence would be placed on this table.
Right, but in Exodus chapter 37, the focus is purely on their... If the cherubim on the mercy seat were a test of sculptural skill, the golden lampstand was a test of absolute precision, structural balance, and botanical artistry.
The lampstand was made of pure hammered gold. It featured a central shaft, and branching out from that central shaft were 6 branches. 3 coming out of one side and 3 coming out of the other side.
It wasn't just a plain geometric light fixture either.
Not at all. The text goes out of its way to describe an intense, elaborate floral motif that covered the entire structure,
making it look almost like a glowing, stylized tree of life.
There were cups shaped like almond blossoms. There are knobs, which some versions translate as bulbous structures or apples.
Right.
And there were distinct flowers. And the mathematical precision of the design is what really jumps out of the text.
It's so exact.
Each of the 6 branches coming off the sides has 3 of these almond-shaped cups, complete with a knob and a flower. But the central shaft, the trunk of the lampstand, was even more ornate.
The central shaft had 4 of these almond blossom cup formations.
And the text specifically notes the placement. There was a knob placed exactly under each pair of branches where they met the central shaft.
So underneath the first pair of branches, a knob.
Underneath the second pair, another knob.
Underneath the third pair, a third knob.
It is perfectly symmetrical, incredibly detailed, and crucially, this isn't assembled from a kit of pre-made parts that were soldered together.
That is the detail that completely changes the scope of the project.
It changes everything.
The text makes it a point to say that the knobs, the branches, the flowers, all of it formed one continuous piece.
This leads us to a massive revelation provided by the NAA Study source. It tells us that this entire single piece, the central shaft, the branches, the floral cups, the knobs, along with its 7 lamps, the pure gold snuffers, and the trays, were hammered out of exactly 1 talent of pure gold.
1 talent.
And for those of us who don't weigh things in ancient talents, the NAA study notes clarify exactly what that means in modern terms. 1 talent is 34 kilos of pure gold.
34 kilos. How do we even contextualize working with 34 kilos of pure gold without modern forging equipment?
It's hard to even picture.
What does that actually look like on a physical level? You have a block of metal weighing roughly 75 pounds sitting on an ancient workbench.
Right.
And Bizel and his team, using hammers and absolute brute force combined with surgical precision, have to stretch and shape that one massive lump of metal into a delicate, perfectly symmetrical tree of light.
The physical endurance required is staggering. Gold is a heavy, dense metal.
Very heavy.
Working that sheer volume of it into such fine detail requires constant hammering and likely constant heating and cooling to ensure the metal doesn't become brittle and snap.
Ensuring that the branches are perfectly balanced so a 34-kilo structure doesn't tip over.
Ensuring that the almond blossoms are uniform. It is the definition of a masterclass in metallurgy. It emphasizes why the text explicitly states Bizel was filled with the Spirit of God for this work.
The genius required to pull that off, keeping it as one continuous piece without snapping a delicate floral cup off the main shaft, is just hard to overstate.
It's remarkable.
So we have the table of showbread with its gold utensils, and we have this massive 34-kilo glowing golden lampstand.
Yes.
But there is one more major piece of furniture in the holy place, standing right before you reach the veil that hides the ark.
The altar of incense.
Right.
And this shifts the architectural focus slightly back to the style of the ark and the table. It was constructed of acacia wood and overlaid with gold.
It was a perfect square, though taller than it was wide, so 1 cubit by 1 cubit and 2 cubits high, or about 0.45 meters wide and 0.90 meters tall.
Giving it the proportions of a stand or a pillar.
And the top of it, the sides all around it, and the horns on top were entirely coated in pure gold.
And that brings up a really key architectural detail from the text regarding those horns.
At the 4 upper corners of this altar were horns.
But echoing the design philosophy of the cherubim on the mercy seat, the text specifically states that these horns were not attached after the fact.
Wow, again?
The wood was carved to form one continuous piece with the altar itself, before the whole thing was overlaid with gold.
We see this recurring theme of structural integrity and unity.
Constantly. Nothing is piecemeal. Everything is fundamentally integral to the object itself.
Bezalel also added a gold molding around the altar and placed 2 gold rings underneath that molding on opposite sides.
So that poles could be inserted to carry it, maintaining that strict requirement for mobility we saw with the ark and the table.
Now, up to this point, the deep dive has been focused entirely on heavy materials, woodworking, goldsmithing, the brute force of hammers, and the architectural planning of furniture.
Very physical labor.
But Exodus 37 concludes by shifting our focus to a completely different set of senses and a completely different skill set within Dezel's team. We move from the heat and noise of the forge to the precision of a laboratory.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it shows us the sheer breadth of knowledge that Bezalel was managing. His team was also responsible for crafting the holy anointing oil and the pure, fragrant incense that would be burned on that very altar we just described.
The text uses a very specific, evocative phrase here. It says this was done according to the art of the perfumer.
The art of the perfumer requires a delicate touch. It's about chemical extraction, precise measurements of spices, and blending elements to create a highly specific result.
He wasn't just overseeing carpenters and goldsmiths.
No, he was overseeing specialists who understood botany and chemistry. People who knew exactly how to extract oils and blend spices to create a fragrance that was considered perfectly pure and holy.
It really highlights that creating this sacred space wasn't just about visual splendor.
It was an entirely immersive, multisensory environment.
You would walk into this space, and the light from that massive 34-kilo golden lampstand would be reflecting off the solid gold walls, the gold table, the gold altar.
And simultaneously, The air would be thick with this highly specialized, custom-blended incense.
It engages the eyes, the nose, the sense of space and weight. It's a comprehensive, overwhelming design meant to inspire absolute awe.
It is an environment engineered down to the millimeter of gold molding and the final drop of essential oil. Every single element is curated to reflect a standard of perfection that the text attributes directly to a divine blueprint.
So what does this all mean? We've looked at the materials, the staggering amounts of gold, the structural unity of the designs, and the multiple disciplines of craftsmanship involved.
Right.
When we step back from Exodus 37, what is the ultimate takeaway from these sources?
Synthesizing what we've learned from both the Holman and the NAA Study Bibles, Exodus 37 serves as a profound testament to human dedication.
Absolutely.
We are looking at a community utilizing massive amounts of precious wealth and incredibly specialized, diverse skills, all poured into creating a single environment of worship.
It wasn't about efficiency.
Not at all. It was about taking the absolute best materials available and pushing human artistic capability to its absolute limit to honor the instructions they were given.
And doing it all by hand, working with dense wood and heavy metals while navigating the logistical nightmare of a desert environment.
It makes those ancient texts feel so much more tangible and heavy, both physically and conceptually.
I couldn't agree more.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about your day. Think about the nature of art and craftsmanship today. We often create masterpieces to be displayed in museums, to be photographed, to be seen and validated by as many people as possible.
That's true.
But imagine Bezalel. Imagine spending countless grueling hours hammering 34 kilos of pure gold into delicate glowing almond blossoms and precise symmetrical branches. Imagine cold forging winged figures out of a solid slab of gold.
And doing all of that knowing that this breathtaking work of art would ultimately be hidden away.
Exactly. Hidden inside a tent, seen only by a select few priests. And, in the case of the Ark, obscured behind a veil and seen by just one person once a year.
It completely challenges our modern idea of creating art for public recognition or acclaim.
For Bezalel, the value of the art wasn't in the audience size. The value was in the act of creation itself and in the sheer private perfection of the offering.
Thank you so much for joining us as we explored the incredible craftsmanship of the Tabernacle and the legacy of Bezalel. We hope it gave you a new way to visualize these ancient blueprints. God blesses all the listeners.